The Galactic Survey Fleet designation, Cucumber 7, had been peacefully cataloguing uninhabited star systems for exactly 437 years when they stumbled upon what their instruments immediately classified as the most terrifying discovery in recorded galactic history: 8 billion apex predators on one planet, all at the same time. Commander Whistlebank Frimpletons had seen a lot of things during his illustrious career with the Blorbanian Exploration Corps. He'd witnessed gas giants that sang opera, discovered 17 different species of sentient mushrooms, and once spent 3 months trapped in a temporal loop with nothing but processed kelp rations and his second-in-command's terrible jokes about quantum mechanics. But nothing had prepared him for this moment of pure, concentrated horror. "Sir," squeaked Navigation Officer Tinklehop McGillicuddy, his 3 eye stalks quivering with what could only be described as existential dread. "The planetary scanners are detecting carnivorous bipeds across the entire surface. They're everywhere." Whistlebank's purple tentacles went rigid with terror. In the 3,000 documented cases of intelligent life discovered by the Galactic Survey Corps, exactly 0 had involved apex predators. The universe, as any reasonable being knew, was populated by gentle herbivores who spent their days contemplating philosophy and cultivating decorative crystals. Predators were evolutionary dead ends that invariably destroyed themselves before achieving space travel. "Run the scan again," Whistlebank commanded, his voice carrying the sort of desperate hope typically reserved for lottery tickets and diet plans. "There must be some mistake." Tinklehop's tentacles danced across the bioscanner controls with the frantic energy of someone trying to prove that mathematics was fundamentally wrong. The results came back identical. 8 billion carnivorous bipeds, all exhibiting classic predator behavior patterns: territorial aggression, pack hunting, and most disturbing of all, they appeared to consume other living beings for sustenance. "Oh, florbulating asteroids!" Whistlebank exclaimed, a curse so severe that it caused the ship's universal translator to emit a small puff of smoke. "Contact Fleet Command immediately." Science Officer Bingleheimer Wobblethorpe, whose 6 academic degrees in xenobiology had never covered anything remotely like this scenario, was frantically consulting the Emergency Protocols Manual. The book, roughly the size of a small moon and bound in what appeared to be recycled sandwich wrappers, had never been opened in the Corps' entire history. "Sir," Bingleheimer announced with the tone of someone delivering news about a terminal disease, "according to Protocol 7-94-0, dear me, first contact with apex predator civilizations requires immediate evacuation to a minimum safe distance of, He consulted the manual again. "The next galaxy over." "The next galaxy?" Tinklehop's eye stalks nearly tied themselves in knots. "But sir, our vacation time doesn't roll over to next fiscal cycle." Meanwhile, at Fleet Command headquarters on the crystal moon of Sparklebottom Prime, Admiral Flibberjack Noodlewhisk was enjoying his traditional mid-afternoon meal of fermented plankton and philosophical treatises when the emergency transmission arrived. The Admiral, who had earned his position through a combination of exceptional administrative skills and an uncanny ability to avoid making any decisions whatsoever, nearly choked on his existential literature. 8 billion what now?" he sputtered, causing his aide-de-camp to drop a stack of extremely important paperwork about proper tentacle grooming procedures. "Apex predators, sir," came Whistlebank's voice through the quantum communicator, crackling with the sort of static that suggested either cosmic interference or someone's breakfast approaching its expiration date. "They've weaponized fire, sir, and they appear to enjoy violence as a form of entertainment." Admiral Noodlewhisk consulted his own manual, a much smaller volume titled "What to Do When Everything Goes Horribly Wrong, a Comprehensive Guide to Panic Management." Page 1 simply read, "Don't." "Commander Frimpletons," the Admiral said with the careful deliberation of someone choosing their last words, Are you absolutely certain these beings haven't simply evolved beyond our understanding into some sort of peaceful, fire-wielding, entertainment-loving herbivores? Sir, our cultural analysis probe intercepted their information networks. They have something called action movies, where they simulate destroying each other for fun. And sir, Whistlebunk's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow managed to convey the weight of cosmic horror. They've created thousands of different ways to kill each other, and they call it cooking. The Admiral's 3 hearts skipped a collective beat. Cooking? They take other life forms, sir, apply extreme heat and then consume them while they're still warm. Some of them even do it professionally, sir. They're called chefs, and they're considered among their most respected citizens. At this point, Admiral Noodlewhisk did what any reasonable military commander would do when faced with information that challenged everything he understood about the universe. He declared it somebody else's problem and immediately transferred the file to the Department of Things That Probably Aren't Our Fault. Back aboard the Cucumber 7, the crew had gathered in the observation lounge to stare at the blue-green planet that housed what they were convinced was the most dangerous civilization in galactic history. Earth, as the inhabitants apparently called it, spun peacefully in the void, completely unaware that its mere existence had triggered what would later be known as the Great Galactic Panic of Tuesday afternoon. "Look at them," whispered communications specialist Dingleberry Frothingslosh, her voice filled with the sort of awe typically reserved for natural disasters and tax audits. 8 billion predators, all packed onto one small planet. How do they keep from eating each other? The question hung in the recycled air like a particularly unpleasant smell. According to every scientific model the Blorbanian Exploration Corps had ever developed, 8 billion apex predators should have devoured each other within approximately 15 minutes of achieving consciousness. Perhaps, suggested Bingleheimer, with the desperate optimism of someone trying to rationalize the irrational, they've evolved some sort of complex social structure to prevent mutual annihilation. Tinklehop activated the Deep Scan Cultural Analysis Array, a device so sophisticated it could detect philosophical differences from 3 star systems away. What it revealed made their previous discoveries seem like pleasant afternoon picnics. "Sir," Tinklehop announced, with the enthusiasm of someone who had just discovered their house was on fire. "They've divided themselves into competing territorial groups called countries, and they practice warfare against each other." "Oh, cosmic refrigerator magnets!" Whistlebank exclaimed, his tentacles turning an alarming shade of greenish purple. "They're not just predators. They're predators who've organized themselves into competing hunting packs." The Cultural Analysis Probe continued its work, transmitting increasingly disturbing intelligence about human civilization. The creatures had apparently mastered not only fire and organized violence, but had also developed something called competitive sports, where they gathered in massive groups to watch smaller groups simulate combat while consuming fermented beverages and processed food products. "Sir," Dingleberry reported with the tone of someone announcing the apocalypse, "they have an activity called football, where 2 packs of predators attempt to claim territory while millions of other predators watch and cheer." Whistlebunk's tentacles began trembling so violently that he had to sit down, which was particularly impressive considering that Blorbanians didn't actually have chairs, having evolved past the need for furniture sometime during the enlightened sitting period of 2847. "And, sir," Dingleberry continued, apparently determined to push her commanding officer into a state of complete psychological collapse, "they've created something called reality television, where they watch other predators compete for resources while trapped in artificial environments." The implications were staggering. Not only were these creatures apex predators, they were apex predators who had turned predation into entertainment, organized it into complex social structures, and somehow convinced 8 billion of themselves to coexist on a single planet without completely destroying each other. It was, by any reasonable standard, Impossible. There has to be some mistake, Whistlebank muttered, clutching his emergency stress tentacle. No species could possibly be this terrifying and still achieve interplanetary communication technology. They should have eaten themselves extinct millennia ago. But the cultural probe's analysis continued to paint an increasingly horrifying picture. These humans, as they called themselves, had not only survived their own predatory nature, they had apparently thrived because of it. They had conquered their planet's surface, its oceans, and even ventured into the void of space itself. "Sir," Tinklehop announced, with the sort of quiet terror typically reserved for tax bills and medical examinations, "they've sent mechanical extensions of themselves to other planets in their system. They're already beginning to spread." The observation lounge fell silent, except for the gentle humming of life support systems and the occasional whimper from junior crew members who were having difficulty processing the concept of weaponized apex predators with space technology. "What do we do, sir?" asked Bingleheimer, his voice barely above a whisper. Whistlebank stared at the innocent-looking blue planet that had just redefined everything the galaxy thought it knew about the nature of intelligent life. According to every regulation, protocol, and piece of common sense in the known universe, they should have been running away at maximum warp speed approximately 3 hours ago. But there was something nagging at the back of his mind, something that didn't quite fit with the terrifying picture their instruments were painting. If these humans were truly the galaxy's most dangerous predators, why hadn't they already conquered the galaxy? They'd had fire for thousands of years, according to the cultural probe. They'd had space technology for decades. By all rights, the rest of the galaxy should already be extinct. "Tinklehop," Whistlebank said slowly, "scan for signs of interstellar warfare. If these creatures are as dangerous as our instruments suggest, there should be evidence of them attacking other systems." Tinklehop's eye stalks swiveled as he adjusted the long-range scanners. After several minutes of increasingly confused beeping from the instruments, he looked up with an expression of complete bewilderment. "Sir, there's no evidence of interstellar aggression. In fact, sir, they seem to be—" Tinklehop paused, clearly struggling with what he was about to say. "Sir, they appear to be staying on their own planet and not attacking anyone." The concept was so foreign to their understanding of apex predator behavior that several crew members had to sit down, despite the aforementioned lack of chairs. "That's impossible," Dingleberry exclaimed. "Apex predators are defined by their aggressive expansion into new territories. If they're not conquering other worlds, then they're not—" She stopped mid-sentence as the implications hit her like a freight train, carrying a load of uncomfortable realizations. "Run a detailed behavioral analysis," Whistlebank ordered, his voice carrying the sort of determination typically associated with people who have decided to solve unsolvable puzzles purely out of spite. "I want to know exactly what these creatures are doing with their time if they're not conquering the galaxy." The deep cultural probe, working overtime in a way that would probably violate several galactic labor laws if anyone had bothered to read them, began transmitting detailed behavioral data from the planet's surface. What it revealed was so contradictory to their expectations that the ship's computer briefly considered filing a formal complaint about the logical inconsistency of the universe. "Sir," Tinklehop announced with the tone of someone who had just discovered that mathematics was actually a suggestion rather than a law, "the majority of the planet's predators appear to spend their time creating things, sir. Art, music, literature, complex infrastructure, educational systems." "What?" Whistlebank's tentacles flailed in confusion. "Predators don't create things, they destroy things. It's literally their defining characteristic. And sir," Tinklehop continued, apparently committed to completely destroying his commanding officer's understanding of biology, "they've developed something called animal conservation, where they actually protect other species from extinction." The observation lounge erupted in confused chittering as the crew struggled to process this information. Apex predators protecting other species was like discovering that black holes were actually trying to help organize the universe's sock drawer. "There's more, sir," Dingleberry added helpfully. "They've created something called vegetarianism, where some of their predators voluntarily choose not to consume other life forms." Whizzlebonk felt his worldview collapsing like a house of cards in a hurricane. Voluntary non-predation? But that's evolutionarily impossible, sir, Bingleheimer finished. "According to every biological model we have, apex predators cannot develop altruistic behavior patterns. It violates the fundamental principles of natural selection." The crew stared at Earth with the sort of fascination typically reserved for train wrecks and impossible mathematical equations. Here was a planet full of creatures that their instruments insisted were the most dangerous predators in galactic history. Yet these same creatures appeared to spend most of their time doing things that were, well, rather nice, actually. "Run a scan for their military capabilities," Whizzlebonk ordered, desperately hoping that something would make sense. Surely creatures this terrifying must have weapons capable of destroying planets. The tactical scanners hummed to life, searching Earth's surface for signs of devastating military technology. The results were confusing. "Sir," Tinklehop reported with the sort of confusion typically associated with people trying to understand tax law, "they do have extremely powerful weapons, but, sir, they're not using them. In fact, sir, they seem to have agreed among themselves not to use their most powerful weapons. They agreed not to use their most powerful weapons," Whizzlebonk repeated slowly, as if saying it aloud might make it make sense. "But that's cooperation, Tinklehop. Apex predators don't cooperate. They compete until one of them wins." "Sir," Dingleberry added with the helpful tone of someone dropping the final straw on a camel's back, "they've also created something called the Internet, where they share information freely with all members of their species, regardless of territorial boundaries." Whizzlebonk's remaining tentacle began twitching uncontrollably. "Free information sharing across territorial boundaries, but that's the behavior of a post-scarcity cooperative society." The words hung in the air like a particularly offensive smell. Post-scarcity cooperative societies were the theoretical endpoint of evolutionary development, the sort of advanced civilization that the Galactic Council spent thousands of years trying to achieve. The idea that apex predators could somehow skip directly to advanced social cooperation without first going through the traditional phases of philosophical enlightenment was like discovering that someone had solved calculus by accident while trying to count their toes. "There's something very wrong with our classification system," Bingleheimer observed with the sort of understatement typically employed by people describing continental disasters as minor inconveniences. "Or," Whizzlebonk said slowly, a terrible possibility beginning to form in his mind, "there's something very wrong with our understanding of what apex predators actually are." The thought was so heretical that saying it aloud caused the ship's philosophical consistency monitor to emit a small warning beep. According to 17,000 years of galactic science, apex predators were violent, territorial, and incapable of complex social cooperation. The idea that they might be wrong about something so fundamental was like suggesting that the universe might actually be shaped like a particularly complicated piece of pasta. "Sir," Tinklehop announced, with the sort of excitement typically associated with people who have just solved mysteries that were never supposed to be solved, "I'm detecting something interesting in their population centers. They appear to have domesticated other apex predators, sir." "What?" The entire crew turned to stare at the tactical display, which was showing heat signatures that defied every reasonable explanation. "Sir, they're keeping smaller predators inside their territorial spaces, and they appear to be caring for them, sir, feeding them, providing medical attention, and engaging in what can only be described as recreational social interaction." Whizzlebonk felt his last tentacle begin to twitch. You're telling me that these apex predators have convinced other apex predators to live peacefully in their homes? Yes, sir. And, sir, the other predators appear to enjoy it. The concept of voluntary interspecies cooperation between apex predators was so far beyond their understanding of biology that several crew members began showing signs of acute cognitive dissonance. Dingleberry actually started hiccuping, which in Blorbanians was a sign of severe philosophical distress. "Run a deep scan on their domestic arrangements," Whistlebank ordered, with the sort of desperate determination typically employed by people trying to prove that water flows uphill. There must be some sort of domination hierarchy involved. The Domestic Situation Scanner, a device originally designed to analyze ant colonies and beehives, began transmitting data about human households. What it revealed was so contrary to their expectations that the ship's computer briefly considered requesting a transfer to a different universe where things made more sense. "Sir," Tinklehop reported with the tone of someone announcing that gravity had decided to work sideways, "the smaller predators appear to have trained the larger predators to provide food, shelter, and entertainment on demand. The smaller predators are dominating the larger ones." "Yes, sir. And, sir, the larger predators seem to think this arrangement is delightful." Whistlebank stared at the scanner readouts with the expression of someone who had just discovered that everything they thought they knew about the universe was actually an elaborate practical joke. According to their instruments, Earth was populated by apex predators who had voluntarily submitted to the demands of smaller apex predators, and somehow everyone involved was happy about it. "This is impossible," he muttered. "Predators don't cooperate. They don't share resources. They don't care for other species. And they certainly don't allow smaller predators to dominate them for recreational purposes." "Sir," Bingleheimer offered tentatively, "perhaps our definition of apex predator needs some revision." The suggestion was so shocking that the ship's emergency philosophical crisis alert began chiming gently. Revising fundamental scientific definitions was the sort of thing that required committee meetings, peer review, and several centuries of careful deliberation. It was not the sort of thing you did on a Tuesday afternoon while staring at a planet full of impossible creatures. "Contact the Galactic Science Council," Whistlebank ordered, with the weary resignation of someone who had just realized they were about to become famous for all the wrong reasons. "Tell them we need to speak with someone about revising some basic assumptions about predator behavior." "Sir," Dingleberry announced helpfully, "the Galactic Science Council is currently in recess for the annual Festival of Theoretical Correctness. They won't be available for another 6 months." "Of course they are!" Whistlebank's tentacles flailed in the sort of cosmic frustration typically reserved for people trying to get government agencies to answer their phones. "What about the Emergency Scientific Crisis Hotline? Currently experiencing unusually high call volume due to the discovery of singing gas giants in the Woozy What's-It system, sir." Whistlebank contemplated the universe's apparent determination to make his life as complicated as possible. Here they were, sitting in orbit around a planet that had just invalidated several millennia of established science, and the people responsible for dealing with such situations were all either on vacation or busy with musical astronomy. "Fine," he declared with the sort of resignation typically employed by people who had decided to solve galactic mysteries through sheer stubborn persistence. "We'll figure this out ourselves. Send down a reconnaissance probe. I want detailed observations of how these creatures actually behave in their natural environment." "Sir," Tinklehop announced with the tone of someone who had just remembered something important, "our first contact protocols require approval from the Galactic Council before deploying surveillance equipment on predator planets." "And how long does that approval process take?" "Approximately 40 to 50 years, sir, assuming no complications." Whistlebank felt his remaining sanity beginning to pack its bags and look for more reasonable employment. 40 to 50 years. "Yes, sir. The paperwork alone requires review by 17 different committees, each of which meets twice per decade. The commander stared at Earth, spinning peacefully in the void, while 8 billion allegedly terrifying predators went about their daily business of not conquering the galaxy. Somewhere down there, according to their instruments, apex predators were sharing information freely, caring for other species, and voluntarily limiting their own destructive capabilities. Meanwhile, his own supposedly advanced civilization couldn't make a simple decision without 5 decades of bureaucratic deliberation. "You know what?" Whistlebank announced with sudden clarity. "Deploy the probe anyway. If these creatures are really as dangerous as our instruments suggest, they'll probably destroy it within minutes, and we'll have our answer. If they don't destroy it, well, then maybe we need to reconsider what dangerous actually means." The reconnaissance probe, roughly the size of a refrigerator and about as inconspicuous as a disco ball in a monastery, launched from the Cucumber 7 and descended toward Earth's surface. Its mission, to observe the daily behavior of the galaxy's most terrifying predators without being detected. This plan lasted approximately 17 minutes. The probe had barely entered Earth's atmosphere when it was spotted by what the Blorbanians' instruments identified as a juvenile human predator, riding some sort of wheeled transportation device. The child, whose name was actually Timmy Henderson, but whom the aliens immediately classified as Small Bipedal Death Machine Number 1, did what any reasonable 11-year-old would do when confronted with an obviously alien spacecraft. He called his friends. Within an hour, the probe was surrounded by a pack of juvenile predators, all apparently competing to get the best photographs of the mysterious object with their handheld communication devices. The Blorbanians watched in fascination and terror as the young humans displayed classic predator behavior. They formed a hierarchical social structure, established territorial boundaries around the probe, and began what appeared to be ritualistic posturing displays. "Sir," Tinklehop reported with the sort of excitement typically reserved for people witnessing historic events, "the juvenile predators appear to be documenting our probe, sir. They're creating visual records and transmitting them across their global communication network. They're documenting it?" Whistlebank's tentacles writhed in confusion. "But why aren't they attacking it?" I don't know, sir. They seem more interested in taking pictures than in destroying anything." The situation became even more confusing when adult humans began arriving at the probe's location. The Blorbanians expected to witness a massive territorial dispute as competing predator packs fought for control of the mysterious object. Instead, they observed something that defied every principle of predator behavior they'd ever studied. The adult humans organized themselves into an orderly queue. "Sir," Dingleberry announced, with the tone of someone who had just witnessed the fundamental laws of physics being violated by a particularly determined mime. "The adult predators they're taking turns looking at our probe, sir." "Taking turns," Whistlebank repeated weakly. "But that's cooperative behavior." "Yes, sir. And, sir, some of them are bringing smaller predators with them and explaining what they think our probe might be." The commander watched in stunned silence as humans of all ages peacefully examined the alien probe, discussed its possible origins, and shared theories about its purpose. Not a single aggressive incident occurred. No territory was claimed, no dominance displays were performed. The humans simply got along. "This is unprecedented," Bingleheimer whispered. "In all our studies of predator species, we've never observed anything like this. They're behaving like a civilized species," Whistlebank finished quietly. The observation continued for several hours, during which time the probe transmitted increasingly baffling data about human behavior. The creatures appeared to have complex social hierarchies based not on physical dominance, but on something the translation software could only identify as expertise and mutual respect. They shared resources freely, protected their young collectively, and showed genuine concern for each other's welfare. "Sir," Tinklehop announced with growing excitement. "I'm detecting something extraordinary in the crowd around our probe. One of the adult humans appears to be what their society classifies as a scientist, and he's attempting to analyze our technology." "A scientist?" Whistlebank perked up with interest. "What kind of scientist?" "According to the linguistic analysis, he specializes in something called astrobiology, sir. The study of potential life forms from other worlds." The implications hit Whistlebank like a meteorite to the tentacles. These creatures weren't just apex predators who had somehow achieved cooperation despite their nature. They were apex predators who had anticipated the existence of other life forms and had developed entire scientific disciplines devoted to understanding them. "Sir," Dingleberry added helpfully, "the astrobiologist appears to be explaining to the other humans that our probe represents potential first contact with an extraterrestrial civilization and that they should treat the situation with appropriate respect and caution." Respect and caution. Whistlebank felt his worldview performing gymnastic feats that would have impressed a professional philosopher. They're treating first contact as an opportunity for respectful scientific inquiry. "Yes, sir, and sir, they're succeeding. The crowd is maintaining a respectful distance while allowing the scientist to conduct his analysis." Whistlebank stared at the tactical display, showing hundreds of humans peacefully surrounding the alien probe, following the guidance of their scientific expert and maintaining order through nothing more than mutual agreement and social cooperation. It was, quite possibly, the most civilized first contact scenario in galactic history. "Sir," Tinklehop announced with barely contained excitement, "the human scientist has just made a remarkable discovery. He's determined that our probe contains no weapons, poses no immediate threat, and appears to be designed for peaceful observation." He figured that out just by looking at it. "Yes, sir, and sir." He's now addressing the crowd, explaining that if there are intelligent beings observing through the probe, the humans should demonstrate their own intelligence and peaceful intentions. What happened next would be discussed in Galactic Council meetings for the next several centuries. The human astrobiologist, whose name was Dr. Roberto Valdez, but whom the Blorbanians immediately designated as Primary Predator Intelligence Coordinator, stepped forward and addressed the probe directly. "Hello," he said in clear, simple language that the universal translator had no difficulty processing. "If there are intelligent beings listening to this, please know that we, the people of Earth, greet you in peace. We are curious about the universe and excited by the possibility of meeting other intelligent life. We mean you no harm, and we hope that you mean us none either." The entire bridge of the Cucumber 7 fell silent. In all their years of studying apex predators, no Blorbanian had ever imagined that the galaxy's most dangerous creatures would greet first contact with a statement of peaceful intent and intellectual curiosity. "Sir," Tinklehop whispered, "what do we do now?" Whistlebank contemplated the impossible situation they found themselves in. Every protocol, every regulation, every piece of scientific understanding they possessed said that apex predators were dangerous, violent, and fundamentally incompatible with civilized society. Yet here they were, listening to apex predators offer friendship to complete strangers from another world. "Sir," Dingleberry announced quietly, "the humans are now forming what appears to be a protective perimeter around our probe. They seem to be guarding it, sir, from potential interference." "They're protecting our probe?" "Yes, sir. The scientist has explained that it represents an unprecedented opportunity for scientific advancement, and the other humans have agreed to help preserve it for proper study. Commander Whistlebank Frimpleton's made a decision that would reshape everything the galaxy thought it knew about intelligence, cooperation, and what it truly means to be civilized. He activated the probe's communication array and prepared to respond to the humans' greeting. This is Commander Whistlebank Frimpletons of the Blorbanian Exploration Corps, he said, his voice carrying across space to the small blue planet, where 8 billion allegedly terrifying predators were demonstrating more wisdom and restraint than most civilized species managed in 1,000 years. Dr. Valdez, we accept your greeting in the spirit it was offered. We come in peace as well, and we are, frankly, astounded by what we have observed of your species. The response from Earth was immediate and enthusiastic. Dr. Valdez's face lit up with the sort of joy typically reserved for children on their birthdays, and the crowd erupted in cheers that could probably be heard from orbit. "This is incredible!" Dr. Valdez exclaimed. "You're really here, you're really talking to us. Oh, this is the greatest day in human history." "Doctor," Whistlebank said carefully, "forgive me for asking, but why aren't you afraid of us? According to our instruments, your species consists entirely of apex predators. Shouldn't you be concerned that we might represent a threat?" Dr. Valdez looked puzzled for a moment, then burst into laughter. "Apex predators? Well, I suppose that's technically accurate in an evolutionary sense, but Commander, we stopped being just predators a long time ago. We're scientists, artists, philosophers, engineers. We're explorers, just like you. But your species practices warfare. You have weapons capable of destroying your entire planet." "Yes," Dr. Valdez said seriously, "and that's exactly why we've learned to cooperate instead of fighting. We realized that our intelligence and technology made conflict too dangerous to tolerate, so we chose a different path." Whistlebank felt the last of his preconceptions crumbling like a cookie in a cosmic blender. "You chose cooperation over conflict? Of course! What kind of intelligent species would choose mutual destruction over mutual benefit?" The question hung in space like a particularly profound piece of philosophical artwork. What kind of intelligent species indeed would choose destruction over cooperation? Apparently, only the kind that hadn't yet learned what intelligence was actually for. "Commander, Doctor," Valdez continued, "would you be willing to share some information about your civilization? We're incredibly curious about how other intelligent species have developed, what challenges you've faced, what discoveries you've made. There's so much we could learn from each other." And so began the first cultural exchange between humanity and the Blorbanian Exploration Corps, conducted via probe communication with a crowd of excited humans gathering around to listen. What the Blorbanians discovered over the following hours completely revolutionized their understanding of intelligence, civilization, and what it meant to be truly advanced. The humans, it turned out, were indeed apex predators, but they were apex predators who had evolved beyond predation. They had taken their competitive instincts and channeled them into science, art, sports, and exploration. They had taken their territorial nature and transformed it into protective instincts for their families, communities, and planet. They had taken their aggressive tendencies and redirected them toward fighting disease, ignorance, and injustice. Most remarkably of all, they had recognized their own potential for destruction and had consciously chosen to build rather than destroy, to explore rather than conquer, to cooperate rather than compete. "You see, Commander," Dr. A. Valdez explained as the sun set over the impromptu first contact site, "being an apex predator doesn't mean you have to be a monster. It just means you have the power to choose what kind of creature you want to be. And we chose to be the kind of creatures who build civilizations, explore the universe, and make friends with aliens." As the Cucumber 7 prepared to return to Blorbanian space with their revolutionary discoveries, Whistlebank reflected on the profound lesson they had learned. Intelligence wasn't about avoiding the predatory instincts that had driven evolution for millions of years. Intelligence was about transcending those instincts, transforming them into something greater, and choosing cooperation over competition, even when you had the power to destroy. The humans hadn't become civilized despite being apex predators. They had become civilized because they were apex predators who had learned what to do with that power. And as the alien probe finally lifted off from Earth, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of 8 billion former predators who had chosen to become something better, Commander Whistlebank Frimpletons realized that the universe had just become a much more hopeful place. The galaxy was about to learn that the most dangerous creatures in the universe were also the most capable of surprising you.